Welcome, everybody, to this edition of This or That. I'm your host, Rajiv Satyal. We're going to be comparing butter chicken versus biryani and dress shoes versus sneakers and a bunch of other things. So strap on. Let's go. Strap in, strap on. That sounded dirty. Strap in and let's go.
Biryani versus butter chicken.
Biryani versus butter chicken. I'm going to sell out my fellow Northern Indians, and go with biryani. You know why? Because you can put chicken in the biryani. So you've got it already baked in. Indians love efficiency, right? So the fact that it's already there, I don't have to travel to another dish. Otherwise, I've got butter chicken, which I love. How am I picking anything over butter chicken? But you have to, import the rice. This way, it's already all in there, and it's baked together, and it soaks up the goodness and all the masala. Although one of my greatest memories of India is I was there for a month, and everyone told me, do not eat the street vendor food. Do not even try it. On the very last night, my only first cousin left over there, Manish Chibber, shout out, just saw him in New Delhi, took me for butter chicken on the side of the road, this huge, black pan of it. And I had it, and I was completely fine. Everybody goes, really? You did that on the last night when you could have been, spending all of your time in the airport bathroom and then the airplane bathroom? Took a risk. It paid off. Still, I got to go south on this one. I'm going biryani.
They say because of food poisoning, don't eat it?
Yeah, your stomach may not be able to handle it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Texting versus calling.
Texting versus calling. I am a big texter. Even though my generation was more into calls, texting is because it's not an event, it's a task. I like tasks over events. Events is someone's calling. When your phone rings, it's almost like you sneeze, right? Your whole body just kind of, or an orgasm, I guess, but more of like a sneeze where everything's disrupted. It interrupts everything that I'm doing. It's really invading on my time. I feel like calling without texting is the new stopping by without calling. People in my generation used to do that. They would just show up at your door, be like, hey, I'm here. Cool if they're a really good friend, but the pop by, I don't know. This isn't Kramer on Seinfeld. So my point being, I'm going to go texting over calling. You can get a lot in there. But I tend to find the compromise. I love my voice memos. I think that is a great compromise where you can still get tone across. This actually happened yesterday where I left a voice memo for somebody, forgetting that the transcript now comes along with it. So he goes, I don't have time to listen to it. It was 3 minutes and 22 seconds. It was long, egregious, almost as bad as calling. And he read it. And so I felt like sending a follow-up text going, oh no, let me just say that my tone is softer than my words. A long time ago, somebody said that we need a sarcasm font. That would be perfect for this.
Oh, yeah. That would be nice. I do love a voice memo.
I love them. You love them too?
Yeah,
That's
they're
good.
nice.
Very few people I know leave them, and I think they're amazing.
Yeah. If in traffic, too. If I'm in traffic, they're nice.
Perfect for that.
Not texting and driving. It's not a call.
I love them. And they still get a piece of you. They get, your personality in there.
Football versus basketball.
Football versus basketball, I'm going to go football. I love football. To me, it has long been my favorite sport. I mean, tennis. I grew up playing tennis, so probably tennis. But basketball is amazing because I like the flow of it. Soccer, basketball, hockey, where there's just no real end in sight, and there's a lot of scoring, especially in basketball. I think the reason football wins partly is that they've gotten the NFL season down to 17 games. Every game is an event. Every game matters versus 82 in the NBA, 162 in MLB. I think it's still 162 and 82, I think. And so everyone becomes an event. And so every Sunday matters, or Monday or Thursday. Now they have it on so many different days of the week. But football also, you just have the one game to decide it all, the Super Bowl. It just feels like there's more at stake. I'm going to go football.
I agree. What about live? On TV versus live? What do you think the difference is? Is it football for both?
I have been to 2 football games in my life, NFL. So college is also there, that you have very much an event because there are 10 to 12 games in a season. So everyone matters, whether you're in Iowa or Ohio or California or Texas, wherever you are. Every game matters. This is a really big deal. Live, also, you got to take into account the weather because football goes through cold season. I don't like being cold. Watching the Super Bowl live was insane because it was here in LA and my Cincinnati Bengals went and lost, sadly. But I would say live, I think basketball is better. You're indoors. And also, if you've ever sat close by, it is mind-blowing because the action is in front of you for so much of the game. So you could sit on the 50-yard line, like Ludacris says, 50-yard line, what to get you on the 50-yard line at the Georgia Dome. I love how he opens a song with that, by the way. Like, he then downshifts. He doesn't raise the stakes. He says, I want to get you at the 50-yard line at the Georgia Dome. Like, where else can you get someone that's even worse? So with basketball, it was probably one of my top 5 experiences of my life, watching the Houston Rockets play the Cleveland Cavaliers at Gonorrhea, as I call it, Gun Arena. And I saw Michael Jordan drop a quiet 32 in their 72-10 season, the 95-96 Chicago Bulls. So watching players up that close, you can hear what they're saying too. So the experience really varies depending on where you are at a basketball game. So live, it's probably basketball, but how often are you going to these games live? So you got to go football.
George Carlin versus Richard Pryor.
George Carlin versus Richard Pryor. I have a strong take on this. So it's George Carlin. And the reason is he is so quoted now, okay? So Richard Pryor was long regarded as the greatest stand-up in history. As I grew up through the 80s and the 90s, Pryor was number 1, and Carlin was 2 or just about getting there. There's Richard Klein and all these other people. Sorry, cut that because I think it's Robert Klein. Anyway, there was Klein, there was Cosby. Sorry, but you got to mention him. If you're talking about the pantheon of stand-up comics, he's in there. Well, he's in a lot of places he shouldn't have been. Anyway, hey-o. So my point being that Pryor gets empathy across in stand-up like no one else. No one had really empathized with a stand-up comic until they saw Richard Pryor. But now when you look at memes, TikToks, videos that are being shared, influences of a stand-up comedy career, it's going to be George Carlin by a long shot. Could that change? Sure. Things change. Sometimes something else comes back into vogue. But right now, you got to go Carlin, which I know is a bummer because all of the best stand-up comics almost are black and Jewish. So you get this white guy in there, and then everyone else is going, what? You got to pick a white guy over everyone? Well, hey, if it's George Carlin, I will. And hey, he's liberal, he's a progressive, so I don't know. Maybe he would hate that choice. Maybe he himself would pick Pryor, but I don't know. I'm going with Carlin.
Action movies versus comedy movies.
Action movies versus comedy movies. I'm generally going to go comedies, but the worst in both genres is tough. Like, a bad comedy movie is far worse than a bad action movie because you still get to see explosions. You still get to see, even if it has nothing to do with the plot, you still get to see that, and it translates into all languages. That's why drama is global and comedy is local. So if you're considering action be part of drama, it's going to resonate around the world a lot more. These huge, big adventure scenes and action scenes. All told, though, I like human interest stories. I like dramas and comedies way more than I like action, way more than I like horror, because I like things that can happen that are grounded in reality. I guess horror could happen. It's the Halloween holidays coming up. So the Halloween holidays, like it's the high holidays, like I'm Jewish. Okay. The point being, I'm going to have to go with comedies because they are some of the happiest moments of my life. I mean, the best action movies of all time, T2, Die Hard, they're amazing, and I've seen them so many times, but not as many times as I've seen National Lampoon's Vacation and Fletch and Swingers. Some people are like, that's not a traditional comedy. I'm like, it's funny, it's a comedy. Get out of here, you don't know what you're talking about. And I'm a comedian, so whatever I think about that matters. So I'm going to go comedies.
An action movie, if something blows up, you're fine.
You're fine.
But if a comedy's not funny, like the whole point of the movie is this should be funny.
Totally.
If it sucks,
Totally.
it sucks.
The other big thing is dramas are about the ending. Comedy is paying off the whole time. So if the ending of a comedy sucks, which most of them do, I think there are like 10 comedies that are funny all the way through, you still feel like, okay, that was maybe 15 minutes too long, or maybe the last 10 to 15 was not great. But you got like, I think Woody Allen, another problematic person to mention here, but Woody Allen had said that 87 minutes was the ideal length of a comedy movie, and after that, it's diminishing returns. So you still feel like you got 85 to 90 minutes of solid comedy, whereas an action movie, you are kind of waiting to see what happens at the end. But hey, you still get the blast.
Which is more controversial and like hard to talk about with people? Politics or religion?
Politics is the new religion. I've been saying that for a long time. If you said to somebody really conservative right now, I don't know if Jesus was all that, you'd get some pushback because that's pretty offensive. But if you said, I don't think Trump's all that, you'd get a lot more. Maybe because it's current, maybe because their views around Jesus are more, solidified or whatever else. But it's the same thing in India. I mean, I don't know. Actually, I think people there are still very, very sensitive about making fun of religion, gods, whatever else. I mean, I had Zarna Garg sit right here, and we did jokes, and she specifically made jokes about Ganeshi being a fat god, and it gets a lot of blowback from Indians, Hindus, my people, who are like, don't make fun of gods. But you know what? We have multiple gods. He can take it. They can take it. That's what I think. I think now politics speaks to more of how you move through the world. Like, when people try to convince each other with policy, that's not going to do it, because they say that you cannot reason a person out of a position he did not reason himself into. And it becomes more of a cultural thing. Like, who are your friends voting for? It's like, what kind of music do they listen to? What kind of cars do they drive? Where do they live? You're probably doing things that they do. So if they all fish, and you've never fished in your life, you'd probably start fishing. If they all started going to museums, you'd probably start going to museums. I mean, it's that way. It becomes a social, cultural thing. And politics feels a lot more now. It feels a lot more relevant because religion is timeless and politics is timely.
Yeah. I feel like it would be like the thing was always during an interview, don't talk about, politics was mentioned, but it's always like money, politics, and religion.
Yep.
I feel like religion used to be number one.
Yeah.
Now it's politics.
I would agree. They say money, sex, politics, religion.
Yeah.
And, those are the things to avoid. They tell us that sometimes when we have orders or marching orders to go perform at a show, and they'll be like, these are the topics to avoid. And politics is just much more sensitive, I feel like. Again, I don't know why that is, but I don't know.
Back to the Future versus Terminator.
Back to the Future versus Terminator. I'm going to go Back to the Future by just a hair, because there are 3 Back to the Future movies. There are multiple Terminator movies. My wife actually wanted to go all the way through. She goes, let's start with Terminator. I've never seen it, she said. And she goes, let's do them all. I go, I virtually guarantee you are not going to get much farther than part of 3. And 3 was okay. It's not bad. Terminator 2 is arguably the greatest action movie in history. I mean, it's a close second to Die Hard. And they are a little bit different. One's more sci-fi. One's more, man in a box. Not really man in a box. Man in a building. Whereas Back to the Future, the first one is my answer for when my friend Rajiv Joseph, another Rajiv from Ohio, asked this. He goes, okay, you get to set up an event. You get a cocktail hour, you get to screen a film, and then you get a blowout party afterwards. I'm like, well, that is kind of what I was doing with my screening in New York. That is exactly what I was doing, and I was screening my own special because, that's what comedians do. Back to the Future has always been my answer to that. For the longest time, since I've heard that question, even before, probably Ghostbusters is 2, but what I mean is an entertaining movie. Maybe Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and his was actually Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and he's half white, half Indian, so I think the half white of him is saying that. Back to the Future is so damn entertaining, and Back to the Future 2 is still really good, and it's so interesting, not because 2 is so good, but to kind of see almost one from a different angle, and I don't know that you have other movies like that. 3 is not great at all, but if I had to compare Back to the Future 3 versus Terminator 3, ooh, that's tough. That's, again, going to the worst versus the worst. I'm probably going to say Back to the Future 3 just because you can get in and out of it a little bit easier. It's shorter, and it's a comedy over an action. But man, I don't know. Back to the Future by a little bit. It's still up there in terms of the trilogies, and Terminator just ended up ruining itself.
Yeah, that's Back to the Future. They have other than the musical, they haven't gone back to it. Mm-hmm. So there's still that level of like it stands on its own. Terminator, they have. I don't think there's been a new Terminator movie that's been good.
They're not good. And the really interesting thing from the first one to the second one is that he's a bad guy in the first one and he's a good guy in the second one. And some of that is probably branding, that they didn't want Arnold Schwarzenegger to continue to be this bad guy. People started to root for him. But
and toys.
It's interesting. And toys. And Kindergarten Cop.
Streaming music versus vinyl records.
I am going to commit heresy and say streaming music because of the portability, the convenience, the value, having it all in one place. That's why. I get why people are into vinyl because of the analog sound versus digital, and it's an experience, and I get all of that. It's like why I like making chai. It's just the whole experience of it, and it's the way it's supposed to be listened to. I get it. I have a record player. I understand it. But it is such a to-do. It is such work to get out the album, put the needle down, flip it over, all of that kind of stuff. I just feel like it's a bit pretentious. The album art is amazing. You can't top that. I mean, if you want, again, the full experience, if you want to listen to The Wall or Abbey Road or Led Zeppelin 2 or any of the greats, right? You do feel like, okay, I want to have the album, and I'm willing to do that for the best of the best music. But how many people can really tell the difference between digital and analog? You can side by side, but I think it's very similar to when people are like, oh my God, I like Coke much better than Pepsi. And they've shown time and time again that in a blind taste test, it's very hard to tell. I think side by side, yes, but in situ, when you're trying to listen to music, what am I going to do? Like connect a record player in my car to listen to it? So I had to sort of dumb it down. And if I want to hear really good music, I don't know, I just turn it up louder.
Yeah, that's fair.
You're a vinyl guy.
Yeah, when I can afford it.
Yeah, it's expensive too, man.
It's so expensive. And there's so much care that goes into it. Like, you can't leave it in the car. You have to clean it, everything.
You have to work for it. That's why I bought that Mom's Mabley album, because it's like, it's a way to show people, oh, I'm into this, or I love this.
Yeah.
Like, it's people would come over in the 90s and early zeros, and they would look at your CD collection. That was a big thing, because everyone had their CDs on a shelf. And you'd walk into somebody's apartment and be like, oh, that's what you're into. And it told you a lot about the person. Now, a lot of us had the same CDs, but every now and then be like, oh, I never heard of that before. That was a great way to share your music without having to be online, which none of us were at the time.
Bill Gates versus Steve Jobs.
Bill Gates versus Steve Jobs. I'm going to give Bill Gates some love because he never gets any love. I heard that he's just as toxic as Steve Jobs, but I don't know. He came earlier. He built something really big. I'm going Bill Gates. Screw Steve Jobs. Rest in peace, though.
Rocket Man versus Piano Man, the songs.
Rocket Man versus Piano Man. I'm going to go with Piano Man. I like both of them, but Piano Man resonates with me more. Why? I don't know, because I've tried to play the piano and I've never been on a rocket.
Arrive early or leave early for, like, anything?
I would generally rather leave early, because arriving early is a time. It's a specific time where you're early and then you're late. You can leave early like an Irish goodbye, but it's still up in the air and nebulous as to when leaving early is, although I usually am a stay late guy. It occurred to me only a few years ago that you can leave the club early. Like, you could leave before the lights come on. I didn't realize that was even an option. People are like, how old are you?
Dress shoes versus sneakers.
Dress shoes versus sneakers. I'm going with sneakers. I grew up on Nike, and I like dress shoes. I rocked them for a long time, but you can now wear sneakers with suits. You can't really wear dress shoes with shorts, although maybe we should try that.
No, God, no. Don't do that.
Not do that at all.
Dress shoes suck.
I can see that.
Yeah, they suck.
That's very much a generational thing.
Yeah.
I think your generation does not rock dress
Get
shoes at all.
blisters, like, make my feet hurt. I'd rather wear Vans and just, like, kick
I get it. You know what that's a sign of, though? You got to buy more expensive dress shoes.
No, not going to happen.
Not gonna. It's like I could buy 2 pairs of sneakers with that.
Yeah, I'd rather get famous enough so I'd be like, take it.
Yeah.
Deal with it.
I know. That's right. No dress code for the famous.
Podcasts versus audiobooks.
Podcasts versus audiobooks. I'm definitely going podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts, 5 to 6 episodes, not a day, maybe a couple episodes a day. Audiobooks, I love audiobooks. I do feel like I'm cheating a little bit, whereas podcasts, I don't feel like I'm cheating at all.
SUV versus car, or like sedan.
I'm going with an SUV over a car. I'm short in real life. I want to be tall, so I'm taking the step up.
Hat versus sunglasses.
Hat versus sunglasses. I'm going to go with a hat because it tells you a lot more about you, how it fits, how you wear it. It still blocks the sun if you forget your sunglasses. But if you're wearing sunglasses and you don't have a hat and you're bald, you are screwed. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this episode of This or That. Please like, subscribe, comment. Tell us, what do you want me to compare? What do you want me to do next? It matters and helps more than you could possibly imagine. I've been your host, Rajiv, and I still am.